I passed course 4 with a 92%, and these 4 things were crucial to helping me and the 500 students I've tutored pass the real estate exams. Okay, now one of the most important topics is the commercial loans. And there are tons of them, almost 8 commercial loans you have to know for this course. In this video, we're going to go through 3 of the hardest and toughest ones for the exam, which are the builder loans. So this happens to be the gap loan, the standby loan, and the development loan. Now, when working on a project, builders typically get these loans in order, starting with the development loan. The development loan is where a builder actually gets a loan to service land prior to construction. So this is where they're actually going to buy raw land, and they're actually going to put in water, electricity, and other services and utilities, usually 1 to 3 years before construction even starts. Once they put in these kind of services and utilities, now they're actually going to begin construction, which is when they proceed to get a gap loan. Now, the gap loan is a temporary high interest loan where the builder will get the initial money to just get started on the project, and where they receive the rest of the money in small increments, or in other words, gaps. And so the builder might initially ask for, let's say, 100K. But because the lender doesn't want to put up so much money because they think it's risky, they're going to give you the payments in 4 different payments, which maybe are separated by a few months each. So the lender might give you initially $25,000 and say, you know what, build 10 units for me and let me see how it goes. If you meet the criteria, you can come back and they'll give you the next set of payments. However, you continue like this in gaps until you can find somebody who's willing to just fork up the initial amount of money that you need for the entire project. And so gap loans really are just a temporary solution just to get started. And because they're high interest, they're not really that attractive for builders who want to build long term. And this is what leads to the last loan, which is called the standby loan. Now, the standby loan is where a lender will give an initial funding amount, usually not the entire amount the builder wanted, but they will give you criteria, which if met, they will be happy to give you the rest of the money for the entire project. And so that's why it's called a standby loan, because the lender will initially give you some money, they'll stand by to see if you meet the criteria, and then if all goes well, they'll give you the rest of the money for the project. And so it goes in this order: development, gap loan, and then the standby loan. And usually by the end of those, they will have finished the actual construction of the building. Okay, topic number 2 that you need to know is actually the light versus heavy use in industrial properties. Now, these are both very different uses, and they're zoned completely differently. And so, for example, industrial properties that have a light use zoning are usually going to feature jobs that use finished products with minimum machinery and minimal chemical requirements, which usually make it a lot safer for the workers there. This could be something like an Amazon distribution center, a food processing center, or a clothing center. Now, an industrial property zoned for heavy use is actually very different, and they are actually going to feature heavy machines and hazardous chemicals because they usually deal with raw materials. And so this could be something like the mining industry, the oil industry, or a factory that is made for steel production. Okay, quick note before moving on: if you are enjoying this video, you're going to love the C4 checklist I've made for you. It's absolutely free and lists all of the major concepts for the entire course. So check it out and grab yourself one copy below. Okay, and this leads us to our last topic, which is assignment versus subletting. Now, assignment on one hand is where you transfer the rights of your lease or purchase of a property to somebody else completely. And so this could be in a situation where you have a few months left on your lease, but you find someone else willing to take over and you transfer those rights to them. Or it could be a pre-construction property that you're buying, and a few months before closing, you decide to assign it to somebody else, in which case they would then close on that property and you would be free and done. Both are considered assignments as long as you hand it over and you have nothing else to do with the property after that. Now, subletting is a little bit different. Now, subletting, on the other hand, is where you rent out a property that is being leased. In other words, you rent a property from somebody that is renting a property. Now, on the screen, you're going to see an example of what a subletting situation could look like. Now, in this situation, we have the landlord, tenant A, and tenant B. Now, tenant A is renting the unit out from the landlord, and tenant B is the subletter. And so they are renting the unit out from tenant A. In this situation, tenant A pays $1,600 in rent to the landlord, and tenant B pays $1,800 in rent to tenant A. And so in this situation, tenant A is making a $200 profit. simply because they're renting out from the landlord, but they're not actually living in the unit. Tenant B is living in the unit, and all tenant B has to do is pay rent to tenant A. Tenant B does not have to meet the landlord does not have to meet tenant B. As long as tenant A, in their contract with the landlord, they were allowed to do a sublease, they're absolutely allowed to pick anybody they want, and the landlord does not have to approve them, they do not have to deal with them. This, however, leaves tenant A responsible for any damages tenant B might do to the unit, or even if tenant B continues to live in the unit and stops paying tenant A money, it is still tenant A's responsibility, and they would still have to pay the landlord money. And so you can see it's a great scenario to make a little bit of profit, but it can be a little bit tricky in certain situations, and there aren't really that many that happen in real life that I've seen. All right, that's it for today's video. If you liked it, you're going to love the other videos I have about C4 on my channel, so check them out, and then I will see you in the next one.